It's such an honor to be here today, and I'm so glad that you're interested in my story. If I had to pick three things that I absolutely love to do, it would be number one, telling stories. Number two, inspiring people to think big and go for it. And then number three, challenging myself, new challenges all the time. I love to get out of my comfort zone. And today I get to do all three of those things. And I hope that for me telling my stories, that gets you thinking about your stories. What stories do you have to tell? What stories should you be sharing? I was at the movies. My husband on my right and my teenage son on my left, and Matt Damon was up on the big screen. And he was stranded on Mars. He was in huge trouble. He was making the most of it, though. He was growing potatoes in his own poop. But he had no communication back to Earth. How were they ever going to rescue him if they didn't even know he was alive? I was gripped. So he gets in his Mars car and he starts driving across the planet. Where is he going? I had no idea. I hadn't read the book or anything. And then he gets out of his car and he starts digging. And that's when it hits me. And I realize exactly what he's digging for. And the tears start rolling down my cheeks. And I'm trying really hard to suppress an audible sob because I know I am the only one crying at this part of the movie. And my son just leans over to me and he sees me feverishly wiping away tears. And he goes, "What's wrong?" And I just whispered up to him, "That's my spacecraft." You see, I'm one of the few hundred people on this planet that put that spacecraft, the Mars Pathfinder, up there in real life so Matt Damon could find her in the movies. And today I'm going to shape my talk around 6 key lessons that I learned from my time working on the Pathfinder mission, the little spacecraft and rover that showed the world that the seemingly impossible was possible, that blazed a new trail for missions to the Red Planet. Pathfinder was one of the true loves of my life, and I'm excited to use her as a backdrop to my talk today. We have so much in common. We were unlikely to ever succeed, and at face value, many people counted us out. And that brings me to my first lesson, which is escape gravity. I think there's 3 types of gravity. There's the kind that keeps you from floating out into space, the kind we learn about in science class. And then there's personal gravity, where you don't believe in yourself and your own thinking holds you down. And then there's crowdsourced gravity, where they don't believe it's possible or they don't believe in you, and their doubts set limits. Pathfinder suffered from crowdsourced gravity. Dan Goulden, who was the head of NASA at the time, said he wanted to blacken the sky with micro missions and move away from these decade-long missions, which he called Battlestar Galacticas. He wanted to move away from that and get into this micro mission thing. And he said those big missions were going to be a thing of the past. He wanted faster, better, cheaper missions and to just completely rewrite the playbook on space travel. And they awarded the first micro mission to the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, otherwise known as JPL. And it was to be an experiment to send a spacecraft to Mars for $200 million, which was absolutely peanuts in the space business. It was our first trip back to Mars since the Voyager missions in the 70s. And just to give you an idea of the scale on the cost, it was 1/15 the cost of the Voyager missions. And we had a really tight timeline of just 3.5 years. With that budget, the joke around the lab was that we were trying to send a spacecraft and a rover to Mars for less money than Kevin Costner had recently spent on his movie Waterworld. There were many folks around the lab that were afraid of what Pathfinder could mean for NASA and for future missions. People didn't want to work on it. They were afraid it would ruin their careers. It was going to be such a huge disaster. And they also didn't know what it would mean for the future of space travel. Was space going to become fast and cheap? Were people going to lose jobs? So NASA and JPL recruited a team of maverick leaders, and then they recruited a crazy bunch of engineers and scientists to make it happen. Why did we have so many doubters? Well, the mission was being done on that shoestring budget, and on that amount of money, one of the things that was absolutely off the table was a sophisticated landing system. So we came up with this crazy system that borrowed from the automobile industry that basically was a crash landing with airbags. The spacecraft would come into the atmosphere at 16,000 miles per hour. The heat shield and the atmosphere would slow it down to 900 miles per hour. And then all kinds of sequence of events needed to take place and take place perfectly in order to inflate the airbags at just the right time and allow the spacecraft to bounce along the surface, eventually opening up. What could go wrong? So much could go wrong. There were limitless scenarios for failure. The odds were definitely against us. Just like Pathfinder, I suffered from crowdsourced gravity. I grew up in Orange County, California, long before it was the OC, and when the only housewives I knew were my friends' moms. I grew up in a super humble home. My parents both grew up very poor. My mom's parents coming to Los Angeles from Mexico, and they bought a small farm. And my dad's parents came from Oklahoma to the West Coast when my grandfather got a job building ships for World War II. So the expectations for me, a girl growing up in the 70s, were not very high. In fact, the career advice I got regularly was, you better get in that kitchen and learn how to cook because you're going to be somebody's wife someday. There was no talk of college or of a career, but I felt I could do more. In fact, I wanted to be like Mary Tyler Moore, which some of you may not get the reference, but she was the first professional woman really to show up on television. She had gone to college and she had a great job where she worked in an office. I wanted to be like her. And the signs were there that I could do more. I got great grades and enjoyed school. I was in the gifted program. I wrote my brother's 12th grade term paper so he could graduate from high school when I was in the 7th grade. But other than the cooking advice, I wasn't getting much direction either at home or at school. So I graduated from high school without any plans for college. I did enroll in the local junior college, or what we called the 13th grade, but I had no idea what I was doing. I was going nowhere. So I did what a lot of other kids do in Southern California. After I graduated from high school, I got a job at one of the local amusement parks. I had just enough self-esteem to think that I didn't go want to work with the stiffs at the Movieland Wax Museum, but not so much to think that I was Disneyland material. So I got a job at Knott's Berry Farm. I got a job working at the Buffalo Nickel Arcade, this huge cavernous arcade space within the Roaring 20 section of Knott's. It was filled with all kinds of games of chance where you could land a quarter on a plate and win a stuffed animal, or you could play skee ball. And we had these brand new video games called Pac-Man and Space Invaders and the like. It was in the Roaring 20 section of Knott's, so we had to wear flapper outfits. Think about the drop-waisted chicness of Downton Abbey meets the polyester practicality of a hot dog on a stick outfit. And there you have it. The outfit was not cool. But one thing that was cool was meeting kids from other high schools and other parts of the area, kids who had plans. Many of them were enrolled in universities. One day I was working in the coveted change booth. This was the primo spot because not only did you get to sit down all day, but you got to make announcements over the loudspeaker. And my lead, Helen, who was a few years older than me and attending a local university, she came to check on me. And she said, "Hey, Cindy, do you know why you get to sit in the change booth all the time?" And I said, "No, why?" And she said, "Because your change count is always accurate." And I was like, "How hard is that? It's just counting." And she said, "Oh, you'd be surprised." So I thought, my peers either couldn't count or they were thieves. Then she asked me if I was good at math. And I said, "Sure, I'm good at math. I liked math. I'm not afraid of math. I wasn't a mathlete or anything, though." And she said, "If you're good at math, you should enroll in a university and major in computer science." It's a growing field. They need women, and starting salaries with a bachelor's degree are $25,000. $25,000? Sign me up. I was making $2.20 an hour at Knott's. So $25,000 sounded like a golden ticket. So I figured out how to apply to a local university, San Diego State, and I filled in the little box for my major and I put computer science, even though I had barely touched a computer up to that point. That one conversation with Helen, where she took the time to recognize my mad change counting skills, changed the trajectory of my entire life, and I am forever grateful. And that brings me to my next lesson, which is find the right atmosphere. We've all tried to grow houseplants where they look great in the room, but they're not getting any sunlight. It doesn't work. They don't always die right away, but they certainly don't thrive because they're in the wrong atmosphere. When I got to college as a computer science major, it was hard. Not only were the courses hard, but I was incredibly lonely in the computer science department. I was making lots of friends in the dorms. It was nonstop shenanigans. But over in my classes and in the computer science building, it was lonely. Let's just say I didn't exactly blend in. There were very few women in the classes, and the other kids that were there were so quiet and serious. It was really easy for me to feel like I didn't belong, and I was doubting every day if I had chosen the wrong major. I considered quitting so many times, but that $25,000 paycheck just loomed. Then a wonderful thing happened. The engineering school at SDSU had a program called the Minorities in Engineering Program, where they did outreach to underrepresented students to help boost their graduation rates, which were absolutely abysmal. As someone who is 50% Mexican, I qualified for the program, and it showed up just in time. Through the program, I received free group tutoring a few days a week, which I started attending regularly. And way more important than the instruction I received was the community that I became a part of. I got to know all the other kids that were participating in the group tutoring, and now I had, a little family there within the computer science department. I had people to say hello to in the halls, people to sit with in class, people to take classes with next semester and study with. It made all the difference in the world. And when I graduated, the prices had gone up, and I made my first job. I made $28,000 a year. That first job was working on the backup flight system for the space shuttle at a company called Rockwell International. Once again, I would struggle with not fitting in. My college job was a DJ in a nightclub, and I went from there to this incredibly straight-laced, uptight, male-dominated environment where you could hear a pin drop. I affectionately called it prison with a paycheck. It was bad. You had to account for your time in 6-minute increments. And if you were away from your desk for longer than 6 minutes, you had to log that as personal time, and you were expected to stay after hours to make up for those 6 minutes. I was a young woman I was loud, I had big hair, bright clothes, a big personality. Again, a fish out of water. I was not thriving, I was suffocating. And I knew I was never going to be successful in this environment. And I knew I needed to figure out how to get away from that company, which meant I needed to gain skills and experience. So I took every course they offered. I learned Ada programming and C programming. I took a couple of Dale Carnegie courses to practice public speaking. I volunteered for special projects and community outreach. I was counting the days until I had enough experience to land a job someplace else. And almost 3 years to the day, I left to go work as a contract programmer, programming in Ada. And then I bounced around for a few years in aerospace, eventually landing at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, where they have this amazing college-like atmosphere, and it's definitely a come-as-you-are place. I felt like I had arrived. I was at JPL for 3 years before I got assigned to the Pathfinder mission, and the culture just never disappointed me, especially on Pathfinder. We had an amazing group of people. We had young people right out of college where this was their first job that didn't involve getting paid in tips. And we had lots of people where this was their last mission before retirement. So, what did they have to lose if it was a total disaster? We had grandmas and grandpas, we had moms and dads, and we had tons of single people like me. And more than that, we had this common bond and a common mission that we were a part of. We were a team of optimists. We believed in each other and we believed in what we were trying to do. Every once in a while, once in a great while, it would start to just feel like work. And then someone would remind us what we were doing and we would snap out of it. And they would say, hey, remember, we're exploring the universe. I can't talk about finding the right atmosphere without talking about another phase of my career where I worked in entertainment technology. I worked for a few different companies working on new distribution models over the internet for television and then music and finally movies. I remember when I interviewed for the music job at the Universal Music Group, my boss who was interviewing me, he told me that someday people would be purchasing one song at a time over the internet, that people would no longer buy physical media. I, I couldn't even wrap my head around it. It was so advanced. At that time, it was taking about 45 minutes to download a 2 megabyte song over dial-up, but I loved the idea of it. We were on the bleeding edge, and peer-to-peer music exchanges were about to break wide open, and legit music companies were about to break too. But I learned way more about diversity and inclusion at that company than I did about software. You see, the Universal Music Group split us off and created a startup out of us and joined us with this other company that they bought, which was like a web development company, an all male web development company, almost all young, unmarried male web development company. And so our LA offices at that time had about 75 people, only 4 of us were women. And more than the gender diversity was just the cultural diversity. Those guys from the web company, they like to work from 10 o'clock or so in the morning till 10 o'clock at night. So they would get a lot of the work done after hours, after those of us with families or those of us who worked a regular set of hours would go home. So it was not very inclusive. We felt out of the loop. So, and they couldn't have been nicer. They couldn't have been nicer. And you may wonder what they did during the daytime. They rode skateboards in the parking lot in the daytime, and then they would work at night. It was unusual. And like I said, they couldn't have been nicer. And then when I did eventually leave, they were sad to see me go. But it just didn't feel like a place where I really belonged. And to me, inclusion is the difference between feeling accepted and feeling that you truly belong. Or as our Microsoft CFO, Amy Hood says, there's a difference between being invited to the dance and being asked to dance once you are there. And maybe even easier to remember, as Whitney Houston says, I want to dance with somebody who loves me. When you belong, you bring your best self and your best potential to the job at hand. You thrive. So I know most of you out there are working in tech, and so I just want to implore you that it's not only important for us to find the right atmosphere for ourselves, it's so important that we create the right behaviors and culture and cultural norms for other people. We need constantly to be checking in with ourselves about whether or not we are creating environments where others feel like they belong. And that brings me to my next lesson, which is be a space commander, not a space cadet. Oh, those early days in engineering, especially at Rockwell, I made so many mistakes. I was just stumbling through life. I didn't really have a plan. I was definitely a space cadet. But once I had the right environment, I began to grow and shine. and I took command of my career. Taking command meant that I was capable of digging deep and delivering big results. I used my grit and determination to make things happen. Because sometimes you've got to dig deep. Your circumstances, your jobs, the environments, everything can change, but the constant is you. And so I learned that I had to decide, who did I want to be in each situation. So my role on Pathfinder, I was the lead support equipment engineer for the Attitude and Information Management subsystem. That is a total mouthful. But what this means is that I wrote software to put the subsystem through its paces and make it think it was either flying to Mars or doing operations on the surface of Mars, when in fact it was right there in our lab in Pasadena. The software for Pathfinder was incredible. We are all so painfully aware as humans that we can't multitask. Well, Pathfinder could, and she could do it incredibly well. And although we were able to communicate with Pathfinder post-launch and even send it new code if we wanted to, for the most part, Pathfinder was an independent thinker, equipped to detect problems and resolve them all by her lonesome. So this meant that testing was job number one. We tested and tested and then tested some more, trying to imagine every possible failure scenario so we could make sure that Pathfinder would behave appropriately. About a year and a half into the project, there was the significant piece of code, of simulation code, that had fallen 9 months behind schedule. And lucky for me, I was given the opportunity, along with my partner in crime, an actual aerospace and engineer and scientist, Miguel San Martin, to go in and fix it. So we needed to write simulation code to simulate the actual flight to Mars. And to do this, we had to just pass all this incredible amounts of navigational data and every star in the sky. It was really complicated. But the hardest part was getting it to run fast enough. We had this timing system that this heartbeat of the spacecraft that we had to meet. And Miguel and I spent weeks hunched over terminals trying to squeeze every bit of performance out of that code until we finally did. And as a result of our efforts, they were able to perfect the navigation system. Because you know what they call a spacecraft without perfect navigation? Space crap. I'm super proud of that code, though, and it is still the foundation for simulation for missions to Mars. I was even brought back to JPL in 2004 to receive a special excellence award for it. And it gives me so much pride when I see news of current Mars rovers or Mars exploration missions to know that my code played a part in it. Solving that timing issue for Pathfinder gave me a sense of confidence that I carry with me to this day professionally, and I continue to dig deep. A few years ago at Microsoft, I had not done as well as I like to do on our performance stack ranking system, so I decided I was going to go after something big. We had this years-long problem that had built up over time, where partners that want to do business with us had so many apps to do business with us. I mean, some had as many as 50. And because these had shown up over time, they had different authentication methods. And so they didn't all use the same username and password. People had way too many sites and way too many users' names and passwords. But the answer was always, well, someday we're going to have just this one magic site and we'll fix it all. And that way you'll have a solution. But the solution was always 4 to 5 years from today, and where n equals today. It was, it kept moving out. It just kept moving out because it's really hard to rewrite all those apps and get them into one and have it be done in a timely manner, right? Is really, really hard. So I thought, this is a big problem. If I could solve it, not only would I have a big performance win, but this might even be red jacket worthy. The red jacket represents the Platinum Club. This is an annual award given out at Microsoft, and it is the biggest thing that they do all year. It's the highest personal individual achievement that they give out. And it's handed out at this 15,000 person conference with pyrotechnics and confetti and curtains dropping and everyone wearing their red jackets on stage. The first time I saw it, I mean, I literally cried for joy for the people on that stage. Their professional dreams were coming true. And I decided right then that someday I was going to stand on that stage. Someday I was going to wear the red jacket. And so I put it on my bucket list, even though my chances were super slim. My org had about 1,300 people, and each year they select one winner. But I thought I had a red jacket worthy problem. I just needed a red jacket worthy solution. So I went to bed one night really focused on waking up with a solution to this problem, and I did. I woke up thinking, hey, maybe we don't need to solve it all the way. Maybe we just need to mask the problem. After all, I have over 50 apps on my cell phone, and I don't have to remember all the usernames and passwords. My phone saves them for me by using this thing called password vaulting, right? So I went looking online for a password vaulting system that could work with B2B systems and that would be available on a computer. And I found one. And I quickly got a demo and built a prototype. And then I started showing it to my peers and showing it to my manager and showing it to my general manager. And the feedback I got was, hey, sweetie, don't quit your day job. Not a lot of faith in me. People did not think I was going to solve this problem. But I knew something was coming up on the horizon, and that was this call for papers that my corporate vice president did every year from her leadership community. She asked everybody to come forward with innovative ideas. And so I did. I wrote my idea up, and she committed to reading every single one of them. So that was my ticket. And I knew as soon as she read the idea, she was going to love it. I just had to sit and wait and be patient. But then I was flying back from a conference in Europe, and I happened to be on the same flight with her, with a bunch of other employees too. But I thought, I'm going to get her alone sometime during these travels, and I'm going to ask her if she's read my paper. So we were at Heathrow Airport, and sure enough, I knew at some point she was going to hit the ladies' room. And so I followed her when she did. And I asked her if she had read my paper. And she said she hadn't, but she wanted to hear about it. And so I got to give her my elevator pitch. And she was intrigued. And she was like, I'll go find it in all the papers. And I said, oh, don't worry. It'll be at the top of your inbox by the time you wake up tomorrow. And it was. And the cool thing was that by the time I woke up, so I sent it to her that night, and then by the time I woke up the next day, she had already sent it to several executives across Microsoft. And it turned out that our very own Azure team was working on the exact same solution, an Azure business-to-business password vaulting and single sign-on solution. And they asked me to come and be their first and best customer, and we would build the solution together. And that became my job for the next year. And I spent the next year also building it, testing it, and traveling the world to tell our partners about it. And guess who won the red jacket that year? It was an all-time career high. It was so fun. It was definitely number 2, right behind Pathfinder. And that leads me to my next lesson, which is take advantage of launch windows. I took advantage of seeing my CVP in the ladies' room and seized the moment. You've got to take advantage when the opportunity is right in front of you. Don't be afraid to grab the brass ring. So on Pathfinder, my primary role was the test software that I told you about, but there was another role that I desperately wanted, and that was to be a member of the launch team. This was a team of about 25 people who would go live and work in Florida and work at Cape Kennedy and get the spacecraft ready for launch. But I wasn't on the must-have launch team list. I was on the nice to have list. I was definitely on the bubble with my role and test, but I was not on the must have list. And all my Pathfinder besties were going. It was going to be, like we say in the space business, a real blast. So I just had to get my name on that list, but I got to figure out a way how, right? So when one of my coworkers, Ron, our Unix system administrator, he lamented to me that he was on the list, but he didn't want to go because his wife was about to have a baby and the timing was all wrong for him. I saw my opportunity. I said, I'll do it. You can train me how to be the Unix system administrator. How hard can it be? And I'll go in your place. And what do you know? Ron actually liked the idea and we sold it to management. And the next thing you know, I'm at the Kennedy Space Center, unpacking computers, hooking up monitors, and all kinds of test equipment, stringing cable under the floor, getting incredibly dirty, imaging our Unix computers, and posing for pictures with the spacecraft in my clean suit. Having free reign at the Kennedy Space Center was even better than I thought it would be. I got to get up close and personal with a space shuttle as it made its way out to the launch pad. Security did chase me off right after this photo. And I got to see several rocket launches, 2 space shuttle launches, all while living on the beach in Cocoa Beach with all my Pathfinder buddies. It was so fun. Definitely a work hard, play hard scenario. Here's a picture of a bunch of us right before the launch. Lots of people had flown in for the big show. That's me in the front row there with the acid wash jeans and the big hair. On the night of the launch, I was about 20 minutes late getting to our outpost building where we had set up mission control because me and my buddy Becky, we had stopped near the launch pad to take a selfie with the rocket. We were way ahead of our time on selfies. And when we got to the outpost building, everyone was stressed out and they were waiting for me and they were giving me the stink eye, like something's wrong. And I'm like, what is the big deal? We had no connection back to JPL, completely dead in the water, no communications. And we were starting to worry that they would have to scrub the launch. And guess what? This was a job for the Unix system administrator. I panicked a little bit. Definitely my imposter syndrome kicked in a bit because I was not really a Unix system administrator, but I did have a lot of training from Ron. So I thought back to my training and I remembered that he first told me to check all the hardware, check all the cables. So I did. I checked with all eyes on me. I checked the back of every machine. I checked every piece of test equipment, just following every cable, finally working my way over to the corner where, sure enough, a plug had come loose on our Cisco router. And I jiggled that baby back in, and we were back online. And I was a hero as the Unix system administrator. With all that drama over, we nervously just paced and paced and waited for the hours until the final countdown. And then as it was time, each subsystem went around the room on the communications link announcing that they were go for launch or go for flight. It was like living in a movie. And then we heard the rocket ignite and we ran outside, pretty much abandoning our post to go watch Pathfinder take off into the night sky. It was a sight I'll never forget. And we celebrated that night, even though it was already 3 o'clock in the morning. But it was a huge step, although we knew it was also just the beginning for our dear friend Pathfinder. Pathfinder took advantage of launch windows too. And one of my favorite fun facts about Pathfinder is the approach that we took for entry, descent, and landing, affectionately known as EDL. Anybody who's ever worked on a big project is familiar with the quality triangle. Scope, cost, and time. They're all important. But something's got to give, right? Well, it was imperative that Pathfinder not go over budget, and there wasn't going to be any more time. NASA would have just scrubbed the mission if it cost anything more or it was going to be delayed at all. So those two were not an option. So the only wiggle room we had was around scope. But you can't cut scope on a NASA mission, or can you? We had that 6 months of flight to Mars that we could add into our time bank. We could launch Pathfinder with so-so EDL code and then spend the next 6 months perfecting that code. As long as we uploaded it before Pathfinder reached Mars, all would be perfect. What could go wrong? So for 6 months, the team tested and tested and tested some more, the EDL code and the surface operations code, knowing that we would do just that. We'd upload it in time and that Pathfinder would approach Mars with perfect EDL code. And that brings me to my next lesson, which is test what you fly and fly what you test. This was the motto of the software team on Pathfinder. So the stories I've told you so far cover 2 of the roles that I had on Pathfinder, but I had one more tiny one, and that was writing a little bit of flight code. Specifically, I helped write the uplink code. We knew we would send software updates, sometimes a complete software rewrite, up to the spacecraft while it was in flight. So Glenn Reeves, the head of software, asked me to write some code to help perform these patches. And the code called for this huge data buffer to allow for these really large software uploads. So we set this max amount buffer. I don't exactly remember why. And one of my jobs was to stuff it with extra characters so that they would be overwritten. So I got to put anything I wanted in there. So I put in the names of all the people on the software team. And this little piece of trivia would play a dramatic role in Pathfinder's final few hours before landing. With just a few hours to go before Pathfinder was going to land on Mars, the team saw behavior in the spacecraft that made them doubt whether they were actually running the latest code. They were panicked, and they were worried that if it wasn't the latest code, EDL was going to mean crashing into the surface. Their chances for success were slim to none if they didn't have the right code running. So they thought about doing a system reset, which would guarantee that they would jump into the latest code, but that was so risky with just a few hours until the landing, not exactly a time where they wanted to take chances. Then someone remembered the names in the buffer, and somebody at JPL had recently passed away, and his name had been recently added to the list. So if his name was in the buffer, that meant they were running the latest code. So a bunch of teammates gathered around a monitor and did a data dump. And sure enough, his name was there. His name was Jordan Kaplan. And so now they know they're running the absolute best code and they can go into EDL with confidence. And you'll see my name there too, my maiden name anyway. My name was in all these transmissions that went from Mars to Earth for the entire mission. So I like to say when the Martians finally do come to Earth, they're going to be looking for me. Test what you fly, fly what you test has personal meaning for me too, where it's all about being my authentic self. When you can be the best version of yourself, anything is possible. And I've had all of these experiences of not fitting in, and I'm proud to say that I am finally super comfortable in my own skin, and I have finally found the right company, Microsoft, where I can be myself and they admire what I bring to the table. I had a big aha moment a few years ago where I realized that I had that old Pathfinder feeling again, that feeling that I could show up every day with my crazy ideas, my sense of fun, my can-do spirit, my penchant for bright colors and big hair, and that they would also let me color outside the lines and wear multiple hats. And I just had this breakdown of being thankful. I realized how exhausting it was trying to keep those aspects of my personality under wraps, and how great it was to just be me. And in my gratitude, I thought I needed to share my story so that other people can see that tech careers are possible and that tech careers are places where you can be you And unfortunately, computer science and other STEM careers still are growing fields for women and minorities. We still need women. We still need minorities. And luckily, starting salaries, at least in the US, are way more than $25,000 now. These careers are satisfying, fulfilling, and they pay really well. And we need to be pushing all kinds of people from all kinds of backgrounds to ignore the perceived stereotypes and just go for careers in tech. And we need to be pushing those of us already in tech to make sure that we are creating environments that attract those people and give people that sense of belonging. One thing I've also done is lead 5 DigiGirls Day Camps for Microsoft. This is one of our trademark events where we bring hundreds of young girls into a day of experiencing technology and meeting and hearing from women that have technical careers. The idea is to show them that it can be done and to build that talent pipeline for the future where we will be facing shortages of people with the right technical skills. There's all kinds of diversity efforts going on, but it really breaks my heart that the numbers of women in tech has not really changed since I graduated college all those years ago. We need to change that once and for all. And that brings me to my final lesson, which is dare mighty things. This is the motto of the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, and it's taken from a Teddy Roosevelt essay about the man in the arena. Far better is it to dare mighty things, to win glorious triumphs, even though checkered by failure, than to rank with those poor spirits who neither enjoy nor suffer much, because they live in a gray twilight that knows not victory nor defeat. For me, dare mighty things has translated into this habit I have of saying yes to things. I just say yes to everything now. I really enjoy getting out of my comfort zone. So when there was an opportunity for me to speak at a diversity event at Microsoft and tell any story I wanted to, I got up and after almost 20 years, I told a story about Mars Pathfinder, something that none of my colleagues at Microsoft knew about. And there was not a dry eye in the house, including mine. And then somebody there told me I should go tell that story at a storytelling competition. And so I did. And then I won. And somebody also in that event said, hey, Microsoft Life, our online newspaper, needs to write an article about you. So I said, okay, I definitely said yes to that. And that has led to amazing opportunities as well. One door just keeps opening another door. And then my storytelling video was picked up by this inspirational video company called Goalcast, and they made this little short inspirational video out of it. And they've published that twice on Facebook, each time with over 1 million views. And I've even been on the cover of a magazine promoting Latinas in STEM. Saying yes to things has given me a bigger life and has given me some incredible and unforgettable moments. Speaking of unforgettable moments, on July 4th, 1997, I was at JPL waiting for word from our old friend Pathfinder. I had left JPL soon after the launch because my job writing test code was no longer needed. We had all the test code we were going to use. So I was put onto another spacecraft where I faced a dilemma. One, it was not Pathfinder. It did not have that same Pathfinder feeling, that same Pathfinder family. And I missed it every single day. And then two, I was doing the exact same work that I had done on Pathfinder. So I wasn't growing my skills or growing my capabilities at all. I would just be doing a repeat. So I decided that it was time for me to venture out. And that's when I made that move into entertainment technology. So on July 4th, I was there as a guest in this huge auditorium with hundreds of other guests. And around 10 a.m., we got word back from Pathfinder that she had landed. Apparently, that whole airbag thing had worked, and she sent us a signal. And we had our first celebration. But we still didn't know what kind of condition she was in and if she was going to be able to fulfill her mission. So we had to wait hours and hours for the sun to come up on Mars and start Sol 1, and for the solar arrays to heat up so we could see what was really going on with her. Was everything okay? Was the mission going to go as we had worked so hard for and as we had planned for? And then there it was. Definitely one of the most beautiful things I have ever seen in my whole life. We had done it. And we all just cried tears of joy. And the rest, as they say, is literally history. I'm so proud to be a small part of this historic event. And it was so cool to see all my friends from Pathfinder on the news. Pathfinder also broke new ground in other ways, becoming the biggest international online news event up to that time. I keep a framed photo of Pathfinder in my office to remind me of all the lessons I learned during that amazing time in my life, about what can happen when you refuse to believe that something is impossible, about how empowering people and giving them a sense of belonging unlocks out of this world potential, and about how saying yes and taking risks leads to adventure and new experiences, to a life in the arena versus a life sitting on the sidelines. And if I can give you one thing today, if I can plant one seed, it would be that. Stop playing small and get out there and dare mighty things. Step into the arena in your own life. Or maybe you can be like Helen and help somebody else through words of encouragement. Help them get into the arena in their life. Get out there. The universe is calling you. Thank you.
That was awesome.
Oh.
I have a fan club behind me now. I wanted to say, these are the people that you they've been watching and say, but we got to say hi.
Oh, hey, I'm trying to get back my.
That was awesome talk.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Let me see. How do I get out of screen share mode?
The technology in you should just say, yes, I can.
Yes, I can. I know I can. I just got to.
There you go.
Did it go? Can you see me now? There you are. There I am.
There you go.
Hi.
So this is the team behind my Pathfinder right here. This is All Day DevOps.
Oh, awesome. Congratulations.
No, that was very inspiring. I mean, they were tweeting all over the place behind you here. Any questions for her that you want to ask? I've got some, but you guys got any specific?
Nothing specific. You
ask
your question.
One of the things that I would like to know is how much do you attribute coincidence to the things that you've been able to do?
Not a whole lot. I think a lot of it is just being, for whatever reason, sometimes it's just naivete, right? But just sometimes just being willing to say, yeah, I'll try it. And, definitely there's a little bit of right place, right time, but you got to recognize an opportunity and jump into it.
That's right. My co-founder, Derek Weeks, just jumped in. Hey, Derek.
Hey, Derek.
Hello. I'm trying to get my camera to work if I can actually do it. Maybe I need to jiggle the cable on this little camera here.
Hey, always start with the hardware.
Let's see. Well, it's not working, but I'm sitting next door to Mark. So one, I love the presentation. I love the story and the evolution of the story. One thing that kind of struck me as I was listening to you was I was recollecting back to a story last year that Mandy Whaley over at Cisco DevNet told. And Mandy told a story of dad ops. And part of that was she said, I've got a she was at a technology conference. I actually saw it live first. She was at DevOps Days Austin. And she said, look, I have an audience of guys here. It's about 98% guys in the audience, as some tech conferences are, Yeah. And she said, let me give some advice to all the fathers out there or all the uncles out there. And so I know you have a son yourself. You mentioned But Mark has, I think, a 14-year-old daughter. I have a 7-year-old daughter. What advice would you give to all the dads out there listening to, think about when, growing up with their daughters?
Yeah, I definitely don't tell them that their whole future is around being somebody's cook and being married someday. I would say don't do that. But I think it's really just showing people that it's possible. Watch my videos, watch other women's videos in tech to see that there are women doing it. There's some amazing women doing it, right? They need to see people who look like them so that they might aspire to something like that. This whole phenomenon and reputation that tech has for being a bro culture, I'm telling you, that keeps people out. I would lead those DigiGirls day camps, and I would talk to the young girls, and I think there was a couple of things going on there. One, a lot of them don't realize that they're going to grow up and need to earn their own living someday. So I think that's one thing that we could teach our daughters is like, why wouldn't you have to pay your own way and earn your own living someday, right? So we need to stop raising our daughters as princesses and raise them as strong, independent people. And another thing would be that a lot of them didn't realize that they needed to work someday. And then a lot of them would say, oh, I would never want to go into that. Everyone who does that is a big nerd and it's all introverted and that, they just, all those stereotypes prevailed. And we would surround them with women in tech saying it's not like that. But it takes so many people investing in getting that message out so that people can see what it's really like.
One of the interesting things for me in your story is something that is the DevOps industry has started to do, which you guys did in 1996. You updated in process.
Oh, totally.
You got minimal viable code, put it up in the air, and updated it on the way. That was incredible.
Yeah. Yeah. And they knew they were going to need to do that, right? And so it allowed us to prioritize, right? So we prioritized the flight, we prioritized the launch and the flight. And we're very, very confident that code was really, really tested. And we were super confident in that. But the code that didn't need to run for 6 months, that was a whole other story. So we could take the time to perfect that during that window and then upload it, hopefully not at the last second, but hopefully upload it late in the game.
We have a question on Slack too. They want to know whose idea was it to put the Psalms into the code?
That is Jennifer Trosper. She's the head of the Mars program, one of the heads of the Mars program now at JPL. And she was our spiritual leader.
Wow. You guys okay?
Well, that's why I saw the Jennifer name on there. I was like, oh, space.
Oh, Jennifer.
Yeah.
Take credit where you can. Oh, great. Cindy, it's been awesome. Derek, any other question or comment?
Yeah, I'll just say, there's nothing cooler than the space program, I think. And just a little story from spring break. We were down in Orlando. We were going to the Johnson Space Center. And the kids were in the back of the car saying, why are you taking us away from the swimming pool and all of the fun, amusement park area of Orlando? And I said, kids, you have to realize there are 3 places on the earth where things can leave the earth. And this is one of them. And just that moment, opened their eyes to the rest of the day of we're going someplace incredibly special to see something that it doesn't happen anywhere on the planet. Yes, we go to airports all the time and fly here and there, and that's, so commonplace, but you can't leave the planet from anywhere. And so, as I've told many people along the way, as we've been planning all day DevOps, Cindy's the one that is presenting at All Day DevOps that has code on another planet. You have to come and listen to her. And I think everyone was super excited to be a part of this and to hear your experience. So thank you.
Thank you. I love telling the story, and this is the first time I've ever told it just to myself, basically. But I trusted that people were out there.
We kind of know a few thousand people around the planet.
Okay, yeah, great.
So,
You
like
weren't
I said,
alone.
the crew out front wanted to say hi because it was such a powerful story. We know you reached some people. We've got a couple hundred people listening right now. And it was very inspirational. That's the word that keeps coming up at Slack. When you go over to the Keynote channel, you'll see it's very
Great.
inspirational. For those of you listening, Cindy will be speaking in other places. If you get a chance to hear her, you want to speak, right? You're going to go out on the circuit.
Well, yeah, you can invite me. People, I'm speaking this Friday morning, telling the same story though, so it will be boring for you. But I'm speaking this Friday morning at the Museum of Flight in Seattle, and they've got a big STEM education benefit that I'm going to be the keynote speaker at. So
Wow.
I look forward to that.
Keep going. You're doing great.
Thank you so much. I'll see you over in the
In
Slack.
the Slack channel over there.
On that computer. Okay.
Okay. Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you all so much.
All right.
Thank you.
There we go. Louise, how are you?
Oops. How are you doing, Mark?